Hello and welcome to my channel, The Feminine Frame. My name is Natalie and here we talk about all things femininity, relationships, and yes, even the red pill and how we women can use it to our advantage. The topic of the day is one that has stirred up a lot of controversy, but I think we need to talk about it. And what is this topic? Well, I'm talking about the term submission. The people, when they hear about this, tend to get very, very heated. If you go on to Red Pill Women's Forums or even the Red Pill Men's Forums, you might hear people saying, oh, submission is a desirable trait for a woman. Or if you're experiencing relationship distress, then you might go on there for advice and someone might ask you, well, are you submissive? Have you tried being submissive? And this is something that tends to ruffle a lot of feathers. And you know what? I get it. I don't generally go around describing myself as submissive because this is a term that has a lot of different meanings and a lot of different contexts. And it probably, when we're talking about submission and the red pill and in relationships, it probably doesn't mean what you think it means. When people first hear the word submission, all sorts of crazy things start to go popping up in their heads. For some people, when they hear the word submission, they might instantly think of 50 Shades of Grey and latex and black and whips and BDSM type scenarios, while someone else might instantly think of a Stepford Wives type scenario with a wife who vacuums in high heels and pearls, and the only thing that she really knows how to say is, yes, dear. For someone else, when they think of submission, they'll think of, some of these super religious, conservative type cultures. Think, sister wives and big love and, out on a prairie somewhere in prairie dresses and that sort of super conservative culture. For other people, the word submission might bring up scenarios of abuse where the woman has no choice but to do everything that the man says. I just want to set the record straight. And I think that most of the women on the Red Pill forums would agree with me that that is not what we're talking about. Nobody there is condoning any sort of abuse. You don't have to be religious. This is, some women on the Red Pill forums might choose to practice a deeper level of submission than we're going to talk about today based on their religion or culture or just personal preferences. But, and we're certainly not talking about a sexual preference here. If you want to practice a deeper level of submission, then we're going to talk about in this video, that is fine, that is 100% your choice. But when we're talking about submission in a red pill context, we're not talking BDSM, we're not talking religion, we're not talking abuse. And you know what, I'm gonna be honest here, there is probably a higher percentage of women in the red pill community who do have a sort of affinity for the 1950s. So that might be a little bit higher than your average population, but it is not what we're talking about either, and certainly not required to be red pill. As we go into this, I think that one of the reasons it is so important to talk about what is submission is because there are all of these weird definitions and varying concepts of what submission is. And so I think we need to talk about what we're talking about when we're talking about submission so that we can sort of all get on the same page. Now, of course, I am not the law when it comes to red pill terminology. This is just what one person thinks. But I think that a lot of women in the community are probably on a similar wavelength to me as far as how we're going to be talking about submission today. Although there might be a little bit of variance there, this will just help get a general idea of what submission is when we are talking about the red pill. Because if we're not talking about the same things, then of course there is going to be a lot of outrage when you hear this term brought up. So that is no wonder that a lot of people get their feathers ruffled when they hear it. Now, before we dive any deeper into this, I need to give another disclaimer. We must disclaim the day away. When we are talking about submission, just let it be understood right off the bat that this is something that is 100% voluntary. No woman should be forced to submit, and that is not what we're talking about. Submission is a voluntary action. It's not something that we women owe to all men simply because of their gender. It's not something that you owe your full-hearted submission and devotion to the man that you've been dating for 3 weeks. And you know what? You are not even a slave to your husband. Even in marriage, submission is something that should be voluntary. It is something that we consider a gift to our men. So now that we have gotten that disclaimer out of the way, let's move forward. How I am going to define submission today is the voluntary act of stepping into a man's frame and following his lead. If you don't know what frame is, I have a video on that, so you can take a closer look at that if you need to. But essentially, your frame is how you see the world and what your goals and ambitions are, and then based on that, you make decisions about how to proceed in the world and how to interact with others. So that's just a very, very quick introduction to frame. Feel free to go to that other video to take a deeper look at frame. But when talking about submission, you are enter the man's frame and follow his lead. Now that we've gotten this kind of technical definition out of the way, what does that look like? What will that actually look like in a relationship? I like to use what is probably one of the most played out marriage cliches ever, and I am talking about that scenario, make me a sandwich. Man says, woman, make me a sandwich. And then the wife, of course, goes, make your own sandwich. In a relationship where a woman is submissive, this scenario would probably go a little bit differently. The husband would probably be a little bit more polite. He might say, hey honey, could you give me a sandwich, please? And the woman might say something like, sure, let me finish up what I'm doing and I'll get that right over to you. When the woman chooses to make a sandwich for her husband, it doesn't mean that she is not capable of other things. It doesn't mean that the man's time is more important than the woman's time, and so therefore she must do all this menial work to serve him. No, that's not what happens at all. The woman makes the sandwich for the husband because she loves him, and it's a very, very easy way to care for him and show her love for him. Taking the 10 minutes to make a sandwich and clean up after it is a very, very low effort way for the woman to show her love and appreciation for her husband. There is nothing demeaning or degrading about any of it. And sure, yes, she might be busy. She might have to say, hey, yeah, let me finish up what I'm doing. But if she can, within reason, make a sandwich, then she will make the sandwich because it's a nice thing to do and she loves her husband and she wants to be nice to him. Now that we have that silly little example, let's take a look at some other things that submission entails. First and foremost, in order to step into a man's frame and follow his leadership, you should presumably have a lot of trust in this man. There is absolutely this stereotype out there that men are absolute imbeciles. They don't know how to load a dishwasher. They can't watch their own kids for a couple hours without the house falling apart. and forget about a man understanding a woman's feelings. Maybe you did tether yourself to an idiot, but my guess is that what's really happening is that the two of you have become complacent in your roles. Now, life is exhausting. And your man comes home and it could be that he is just too tired to help with the chores. He has given all his energy throughout the day and he has nothing more to give. Or perhaps he does help with chores and childcare, but he just has a different standard for how things should be done. And his standard for clean, the bar might be set a little bit lower than yours. Maybe he prioritizes fun over getting the kids bathed in teeth brush and jammies, those sort of things. So he might have different priorities and goals. He might have lower standards for cleanliness, but there's a good chance that you did not marry an idiot. I advise trying to extend just a little bit of grace to the man who is trying. He might sometimes fail, but look for the good things that he does. Is he a good provider? Does he work hard for your family? Is he a good father? And I'm sure that you would be grateful if he extended that same little bit of grace to you for your own personal failings. Part of submission is trusting that you have married or are in a relationship with a capable and competent man. You trust that he is capable to run his own life. You trust that he's able to navigate his own familiar relationships. You trust that he is able to manage his own workload and run his own business. You don't feel like you need to tell him how to run his business or get involved in all the drama with his workplace drama or with his drama with his family or friends. And you don't need to mother him and tell him how to do simple tasks. Part of submission is also trusting in his good intentions for you. This might be trusting that he's attracted to you and loves you when he's going out on a guy's night. Or maybe he says something careless. Don't we all sometimes? This is trusting that when he does say something careless, that he probably was not meaning to hurt you. Trust that, say, if he gets a new job across the country, that he's not trying to tear you away from your friends and family, but that he's trying to forge a better future for you. And yes, even trust that when he leaves his dirty socks on the floor for the zillionth time, that he is not trying to make more work for you. Although it might seem a little careless, he probably just has other things on his mind. If you have this trust in your man and his abilities and in his good intentions, then following his lead suddenly becomes a lot easier. That seems all very nice, but sometimes we actually don't trust our husbands. Now, if these sort of trust issues are based on your own insecurities and personal traumas, or just, small annoyances or small mistakes, he forgot to pay a phone bill one time 3 years ago, and so now you never trust him with the money. If your trust issues stem from things like that, then it might be a good idea to just try to practice submission and try to follow his lead. Because sometimes we sort of get into these patterns where it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing, where we just both start to treat each other poorly, and there's lots of miscommunications and mistakes, and there's a lot of scoreboarding happening, and you just keep reacting to each other in a negative way. And if that's the case, neither one of you is really a bad person. You're just struggling to interact together. And in that case, somebody has to make the change, and it might as well be you. So if your trust issues come from these smaller things, then it might be a good idea to practice submission, practice following his lead, just little bit by little bit, and see if things don't improve. Now, I also understand that trust issues can stem from much bigger things, infidelities and addictions and things like that. And those are things that are going to take a lot more work and where the trust really has to be rebuilt and earned. So I do want to acknowledge those situations as well. The next practical way to submit is to watch how you speak. Women are notorious for nagging and complaining, scoreboarding, keeping track of things that he did 10 years ago. Maybe you place all the blame for him whenever things go wrong. Maybe you snap at him for no reason when it's that time of the month, or when you're feeling a little bit angry. Speaking disrespectfully can be even more egregious if you belittle him or demean him, if you name call him. Another way would be like constantly interrupting him, or complaining to your friends about him frequently, or even worse, criticizing him publicly. These are all ways that show disrespect. I think we need to acknowledge that we are all human. We are all going to, get a little bit emotional when we're talking about things. Or maybe you do get hangry once in a blue moon and snap at him. But if you find yourself doing any of these things habitually, then you have a respect problem. And being respected is important to men. This need for respect might feel like archaic ego. It might seem like, oh, if he just did X, Y, and Z, then we would have no problems. Or maybe you don't even see a problem with the way that you talk to him, but he does. He's going to interpret these sort of behaviors as being disrespectful, and he doesn't want to feel like he's in a constant power struggle with you. That's not what he wants at all. Submission in our speech is not about walking on eggshells with your man. Oh, I can't say this, I can't say that, I have to talk in this specific way. It isn't like, oh, you have to protect his fragile male ego because he can't handle any sort of disrespect. That is not the intention behind submission in how we talk. The intention is that you want to talk in a respectful way to a person that you love. It's about communicating in a way that your partner feels valued. It is a tool for creating harmonious interactions that create space for intimacy. And I want to emphasize that being courteous and respectful is a standard that we should always kind of seek to uphold. And why not especially hold yourself to that standard with the person that you are supposed to love and cherish the most? Our next way to submit to a man is to do nice things for him. Make that silly sandwich. You're not making it because you're subservient to him. It's not because women belong in the kitchen. You are making a sandwich to nourish someone that you love. You're doing it to make his life just a little bit easier because you take care of each other. For some women, doing nice things for their husband, it's not something that they even have to think twice about. For some women, however, it can seem like an assault on their pride to even have to lift one little tiny finger to help their man. After all, he's a grown man. He should be able to do that himself. And for this kind of woman, sees it as an affront to a century of social reform to even do anything nice for a man. Now, I'm going to guess, however, that most of us women fall not into that first category of women who doing nice things all the time for her husband or for her man is very easy and natural. And most women probably don't even belong in the second category of women who just don't want to have to help a man at all. Now, most women probably belong in a third category of women where the reason that they struggle to make that sandwich is because they are so stressed and overextended. This type of woman might frequently find herself declining to do things, and sometimes in a not very nice manner. Or if she does make that sandwich, it's only with like the most begrudging attitude. If you're in this category of woman, it doesn't make you bad, it doesn't make you mean. You are just stressed and overwhelmed beyond your capacity. And I think that this fits so many of us women today. If that is you, there might not be an easy fix, but some things that you can consider is cutting out unnecessary tasks. You might have to prioritize what's really important. Are there ways that you can streamline your routine? Can you choose simpler options when available? In the red pill space, a lot of us are into homemaking. We really like to make the home a special place. Always set the table and use your fine china. And if you are in this category of woman who is so overwhelmed that she is just unpleasant to be around for her husband and her children, then to you, I say fine china is nice, but go ahead and bring out the paper plates. Go ahead and mix your darks and your whites. That is just the season of life that you are in. and you can maybe do one nice family dinner a week on the fine china, and things will get less busy and you can go back to doing a real proper job. Just think of ways that you can simplify things and make things easier on yourself. If you have any friendships that are really emotionally draining, I'm not saying that you need to cut these people off. Maybe you choose to, but you can maybe cut back on how often you see those people or how many favors you do for them. Stay out of other people's drama as much as possible. If you are feeling so drained from other people that you have nothing left to give to your family, that you should really evaluate there. Another thing that you should be looking towards doing if you are constantly feeling stressed and overwhelmed is taking a good look at your mental health. For you, that might include things like therapy or making sure that you are getting time to yourself every day. Look after your physical well-being. Take time to do things that you enjoy regularly. And accept help. Maybe accept help from women at your church or from a friend or even from your husband if he offers it. Another thing that you might have to learn to do is learn how to say a polite but firm no. If you are able to successfully create a little bit of mental and emotional slack, then it might free up a little bit of room, not only for yourself that is needed, but also for showing and extending a little bit of kindness and service to your husband and to your children and members of your family. And that, I think we can all agree, would be a good thing. I hope we could agree that that's a good thing. All right, now the most obvious part about submission would be following your man's lead. Now, I know that there are lots of different ideals for the ideal relationship, but a lot of women who are in a red pill space look for a man who has leadership qualities. Being in a relationship with a man that they trust and whose lead that they do feel that they can follow makes them feel happy and secure. As we talked about before, it is crucial that if you are going to follow a man's lead, that you trust him. Ideally, you would also share his core values and have an understanding of his vision for the future and support him in that. So if you are a single woman watching this video, then you will want to take note and only pursue relationships with men who you do share common core values with and who you do feel like you could have a shared vision for the future. That will make having a harmonious, successful relationship a lot easier if those things are in place. Now, we also already kind of talked about the women who might already be in a relationship or married to a man who they maybe don't have a lot of trust with. Maybe they didn't consider the future or common values when they got into the relationship. And if that is you and you're trying to make your relationship work, then actively start looking for things that you do share and look for the ways that you do appreciate your man. Now, when we're talking about following a man's lead, it doesn't mean that you just unquestioningly do everything that he says. His word is law. But it might mean that you take a step back and don't sweat the small stuff. But it also means that if you do have a concern and it's something that is bothering you or that you just don't understand, you're allowed to bring it up. You're allowed to have questions. You're allowed to have doubts. You're allowed to have insights and concerns and advice. If you need clarification or reassurance or just some understanding on where he's coming from, you're allowed to ask for that. You are allowed to offer and share your perspective and your opinions. That's a good thing to do in a relationship. Nobody here is saying that you shouldn't do that. What we are saying is that if you trust your man, you trust in your shared vision, sometimes you do follow his lead, even if you would do things a little bit differently. Now, if that decision would lead to, serious physical or emotional harm, or if it, violates one of your core values, or is something, egregiously illegal or something, then of course you don't have to follow his lead on that. But for most things, hopefully they don't fall into those sorts of categories. And it's not the end of the world if things don't go as planned. And sometimes it's okay to let him take the lead and let him take the reins, even if what you would have chosen maybe would have been a little bit different. And that is why choosing a man who does share, common values is so important, because there are going to be times that you disagree. So it's just crucial that you do only try to pursue men who do have a common values with you and who do have common goals that you can share a life with. All right. Now I know that we all knew that this was going to come up, but yes, submission in the bedroom. That is another way that you can be submissive to your man. Now, when we are talking about submission in the bedroom, we are not necessarily talking about a dom-sub relationship. There is going to be a variety of sexual preferences within all relationships. So no, we're not talking about any particular kink here when we're talking about sexual submission within this context. What we're talking about is making an effort to be an active and enthusiastic participant in your own bedroom life. If he's asking you to do something really out there, then maybe that fantasy is just something that's best left in his head. I will also say that a very common fantasy that many men have is a threesome, and sexual submission in a red pill context does not necessarily mean that you have to indulge that. When you agree to be in a relationship with him, you are agreeing to be in a relationship with him and not with other people. Your relationship is with him, it's not with other people. So that, I would say, is a common fantasy that a lot of men have, but it's not one that you should feel that you have to indulge. You might consider giving reasonable requests a try, even if it is not something that is your own personal fantasy. You might find that you enjoy it a little more than you thought. So when talking about submission in the bedroom, there are some things that you might want to just think about, like, do you ever initiate? Or on the other hand, are you frequently turning down his advances? Are you enthusiastic, or is being intimate with your husband just something that you see as a duty? One more thing to check off your list. Are you ever demeaning of your husband for his, if his libido is higher or lower than yours, or for his fantasies? Do you demean him for his performance ever? Are you willing to try those new things? And are you willing to try and put a little effort into spicing things up? And do you put effort into remaining attractive? A man wants to be loved and desired by his woman. Part of submission is showing your man that you love him by receiving those advances. It's expressing your desire for him. Everybody wants to be desired. It's a willingness to try new things. And your intimacy for him is given willingly, and it's not given in exchange. It's not given to control a man. You are intimate with him because you love him. Okay, now a last little category that I want to talk about when talking about submission is submission in receiving. Being submissive also means that you are willing to receive, whether it stems from a battle to be independent or from this desire to never be a burden to anyone. A lot of us have trouble with receiving. This is a very important but often overlooked part of submission. What a lot of us don't realize is that receiving is actually a very important part of submission. When you allow yourself to receive from your man, you show him that he is needed, that he is valued, and that he is appreciated. And chances are that you are refusing to receive without even realizing it. Now, yes, there are going to be more egregious examples of refusal to receive, such as spurning his advances or, showing distaste at a Christmas or anniversary gift. But you also might find yourself refusing to receive without even thinking about it. These might be things like declining his help with the dishes or rushing to get the door before him so that he doesn't have to open it for you. And when you do these things, you are refusing to receive. These small sorts of infractions are probably not going to be the end of your relationship, but what they might signal over time is that his considerate actions are unwanted. When you refuse to receive continually, then you are denying your man this opportunity to care for you and to provide for you and to practice his skills as a masculine leader. And you are also denying yourself the opportunity to be taken care of as a woman. Men in our society are continually told how much they're not needed. So why not let him know how much you need him? Okay, now we're going to take it back to the beginning. Just a reminder that all this talk about submission is all 100% voluntary, and that there might be times that even a submissive woman might have to say no to her husband or to her boyfriend. It might be because it's something that violates your values, or it could be just simply that you don't have the time or emotional bandwidth to fulfill whatever he's requesting. And that's okay, that is allowed. You are allowed to say, hey, no, I can't do that right now. Can I get to that later? Or I have too much on my plate to handle that right now. Or simply, no, I can't, I'm sorry. And saying those things and well, you know, you still want to be as respectful as you can, but it is okay to say no. Now, the final thought that I want to leave you with is that your submission, it's voluntary. It is a gift that you are giving to your man. Submission is not about abuse. It's not about being less than. Women have such high expectations for men. Even red pill women, I would say even especially a lot of us red pill women, have high expectations for our men. But that doesn't mean that we think that relationships are supposed to be one-sided. And one thing that you can give to your man is your submission. This gift is based on your love and trust and respect for him. We talked about all these, you know, things that people think of when they think of submission, but in reality, and in this context, when we're talking about submission, submission is going to look a lot like just being a respectful, caring, and considerate partner. That is what submission looks like in practice. Submission is first this attitude, and then the behavior follows. You know, yes, there are going to be some red pill women who practice submission to a more extensive degree based on their religious, cultural, or just personal preferences. But if you go onto a red pill forum and you hear somebody asking, like, hey, you know, are you submissive to your man? Or saying that you should be submissive to your man. What they're in actuality talking about is, are you being respectful? Are you considerate of your man? Do you trust your man and follow his lead? And I would say that those are all wonderful things to have in a relationship. I think it's really, really important to clarify that this is what we are talking about when we talk about submission, because I do, you know, of course, see people who come into the forums or comment on my TikTok videos or what have you, and they hear the word submission and they just immediately dismiss everything else that is being said, because our definitions of what submission is are just, you know, worlds apart. And so I think clarifying what we're actually talking about, when you come onto a forum and somebody says the word submission, what we're actually talking about, having a common understanding is really important. And then, you know, also, unfortunately, I do see situations where there are young ladies who are just learning about the red pill. Maybe they found it on their own, or maybe they have a boyfriend who says, you know, I'm red pill, I'm alpha, and you need to submit to me. And that is a very unfortunate situation, because often what these young girls, what their understanding of submission is kind of that doormat, have to, you know, be meek and accept everything he says at face value and allow really controlling or demeaning behavior. And so I think it's very, very important for us, when we're talking about submission, to be clear that that is not what we're talking about. That is just a controlling man. That is not a good man. That is not something that is required of you. That is not something that is going to lead either of you to be happy or to have a good relationship. But unfortunately, that does happen. So I'm just really glad that I hope that this video brings a little bit of clarity to what we're talking about when we're talking about submission within this context. Submission is a gift that you give to your man because you love him and you trust him and you want to interact with him in a courteous and respectful way. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'm glad that we could clarify that a little bit. It has been a pleasure to have you. Bye.